the Tsuut'ina, Stoney Nakoda Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. Welcome, everyone. So today is the first of a few webinars that we will be hosting, and these will be followed up by workshops. And, we're really excited to start this off as safe sport. Our speaker today will be taking you through what safe sport is. Perhaps it's a term that you hear often and you feel you should know, but again, we're here to introduce you regardless of the knowledge of what safe sport is. Super important and really excited that we are talking about this. So regardless if we're talking the grassroots, provincial, national or international level, safe sport is key to making sure that all participants, youth, adult, volunteers, coaches, parents, everybody is safe. So let me start by introducing our speaker today. Laurie Erdman was born and raised in France, immigrated to Canada 5 years ago after earning a bachelor's in international law and a master's degree in law, economics, and management. She did an internship at the Calgary Olympic Oval. I might have met her once or twice there, studying the impact of the long-term athlete development pathway on the feeding system to the national training pool. She was then hired as a high performance coordinator at the Olympic Oval until 2021. And in 2021, Laurie created her own consulting agency, Erdman Ward Consulting, where she works with sport organizations such as Karate Canada, Ski Jumping Canada, Karate Alberta, on how to implement safe sport policies and processes. She also works full-time with Equestrian Canada as a safe sport and racial equity, diversity and inclusivity coordinator. She's always had an interest in safe sport and creating safe and welcoming environment for all to thrive. So we are very pleased to welcome Laurie. Laurie, take it away. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Catriona, and thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. So we'll just, I wanted to start, let's go to slide number 4. I wanted to start, before we go into the subject of safe sport, really talking about what is safe sport, how do we implement it. I was hoping that we could do a bit of a quick survey on who is with us today, who is joining us, and what type of organization are you representing. So yeah, one more, sorry. One more, yes. So we'll go to the Menti. Sandra, if you can share the Menti link in the chat, then everyone can go on Menti and you'll be able to vote on what type of organization are you representing, and we'll be sharing that on screen to get an understanding of who is with us and what kind of needs do you have. Okay, so I see the results. I don't know why you don't see them on here. Give me one sec. Okay. Sorry, just. Okay, so we can't see the result. I'm not sure why, but I'll just do a quick overview. So we have 27% of NSO members here, 32 of PSO members. We have about 13% of sport association. And then we have 17% of sport facility and 17% of sport club. So as you can see, we have a really wide range of different level of organization, and we have a really wide range of potential different needs. If you wanted to share in the chat what organization you're with, and who you are, and what you're hoping from that seminar, that would be amazing. So we can get a bit of an understanding. You also all sent really interesting questions, and we'll be talking about those questions at the end. So first, for today's agenda, first question, what is safe sports? Then we'll go into how to implement safe sport policies. And third, we'll go let's talk about the reality of your organization with quite like a Q&A section where everyone can just exchange and discuss everything that is related to safe sport. So if we can go to the next slide. And so that's the agenda and the slide after. Okay, perfect. So what is safe sports? Anyone involved in sport should be able to thrive and perform at their best without fear of abuse, neglect, of other maltreatment. Creating safe sport environments that provide those conditions is a collective effort from, the national level, as Catriona said, to the international level, all the way to the clubs. It is a collective effort that we all have to do together. So it does require proper training so people can recognize maltreatment and prevent and address it. So we'll be going through that during the seminar, really talking about how do we see maltreatment and how do we improve our environment as a whole. I wanted to share with you a quote from Sadie Smith, former chair of the COC Athletes Commission and two-time Olympian. There is a shift happening for sure, and you can see it around key decisions as athletes were being taken more seriously and senior leaders are asking for our opinions, not because they feel that they have to check a box, but because they believe that we have something important to bring to the table. Safe Sport is all about that, bringing important discussions to the table. Those discussions may be uncomfortable, but we have to be willing to sit through them, and we have to be willing to talk about it. So really giving a chance to athletes, but all members of the organization to be a part of that discussion. So before we go into more detail, next slide, please. I wanted to ask the question, why safe sports? So regardless if you're a member of an NSO, a PSO, why decide to go down the safe sport route? So as I just mentioned before, creating a safe and welcoming environment for all to thrive. Our goal as a community is to make sure that everyone is involved within the sport movement, everyone benefits from it. And so like the best interest of the sport community as a whole is the heart of the Safe Sport initiative. So when we talk about sport community, we go from athletes, parents, coaches, we also go staff member, you have your officials, you have your board members, so many layers that we have to take into consideration when we do anything like that. So you want to equip your coaches, administrators, and others to make decisions that promote athletes' physical and mental well-being and empower sporting organizations to foster a culture that contributes to athletes' success. So this is really why Safe Sports. And I think that's always what we keep in mind as we go through the motion of the Safe Sport implementation. Then on the next slide, I wanted to mention to you the cornerstone of Safe Sport. You may have heard of it already, but if not, it's the Universal Code of Conduct to address and prevent maltreatment in sport. I'll call it UCCMS for short after this. So after extensive consultation and collaboration amongst the national sport community, the UCCMS was launched in December 2019. Sandra will be sharing with you the most current version of the UCCMS in the chat. Please note that it isn't a live document. It is a living document that keeps evolving as we evolve through the waves of Safe Sport and as we discover more. So keeping an eye on the UCCMS as much as possible will always give you some good highlights and understanding of what we're trying to do here with Safe Sport. So the UCCMS provides the common definition and clearly outlines prohibited behaviors in several areas of maltreatment. So that would go from physical, psychological, sexual maltreatment, but it also talks about grooming behaviors and power imbalance. Oops, sorry, something is happening outside here. If you are federally funded, you will be required to include the UCCMS in your policies by April 1st, 2021. If you're not federally funded, but you are working with an NSO as a PSO, for example, you might see changes within the policies and within the processes of your NSO because of the implementation of of the UCCMS, and that may have repercussion on your processes as a PSO because of those new requirements. So it's really important for you to keep an eye on that document, and just keep updated, like keep yourself updated on it, because it's evolving really fast. For the next slide, let's talk about a new independent safe sport mechanism. So announced July 6th, 2021 by the Honorable Stephen Guilbeault, Minister of Canadian Heritage. It was announced that a new independent safe sport mechanism will be put in place to support the complaint process throughout for the sport environment. So Sandra will be sharing the link to the announcement if you wanted to have a look at it. So this is an initiative led by the Sport Dispute Resolution Center of Canada, also called SDRCC. The SDRCC is Canada's premier tool for source for tool and information to help prevent and resolve disputes within the Canadian sports system. So let's say if you haven't, to give you a bit of an understanding of how complaints work throughout the sports system, at this time, NSOs will have independent third party that we will be sending their complaints and everything through those independent third party. Now we are just bringing all those independent third party together to have one organization that will be providing support and guidance to victims, conduct independent investigation of reported incident, identify appropriate penalties, and conduct fair, transparent hearings and appeal. So we are really trying to bring that portion of unbiased, neutral observer within the sports system to make sure that we are doing the best we can for our athletes. Then let's review the responsible coaching movement. It is a coaching association of Canada's initiative. Yes, next slide. Sandra will be sharing with you in the chat the link to it. So it is it is a call to action for sport organization, parents, and coaches to enact responsible coaching across Canada on and off the field of play. Your club doesn't have to be a member of a PSO or an NSO to take the pledge. Sandra will also be sharing the link to the pledge with you. And the goal is really to show parents, to show your members that you have understood the concept of safe sport, and you understand that it's an important discussion, and that you are taking their children and your members' safety seriously. So you have three pillars to the responsible coaching movement, RCM for short. You have the rule of two, an open, observable, and justifiable setting. Then you have screening. Coaches and sport organization leaders are screened to meet requirements to be involved in sports. And then you have ethical training, lifelong learning through numerous training modules to help expand your awareness and knowledge of the safe sport topics. So we'll go first to the rule of two. So next slide. Perfect. Thank you. The rule of two in-person setting. So when following the rule of two responsible adults, a coach and a staff, a parent, or a screen volunteer are present with a participant at all time. There may be exception in emergency situation. Let's say, for example, you need to bring someone to the hospital, that's okay. But we just want to make sure that this is the gold standard that you're always aiming for when you are doing things within your organization. A few points to that. So first, work as a team. A coach should have another coach or screen adult, parent, or volunteer present when interacting with participants. Remain open to the public, have a training environment that ensures all situations are open, observable, and justifiable. Plan transportation, have at least 2 adults present when traveling with a participant, and refer to your club travel policy if you have one. If you don't, maybe you can consider getting one. Then be sensible. So be considerate to the gender of the participants when selecting coaches or volunteer. You always want to have all genders represented when you are doing activities, if there is a need for it. Sorry, you should always have all genders represented, but you might have a situation where you need to have someone from the same gender interacting with an athlete. So you want to make sure that you have that planned. And then transparent communication. Ensure that all communications are sent to the group and or include parents or guardian without one-on-one messaging. So this is really to protect yourself as a coach, as an administrator, as a member of the organization, but you also want to protect your athletes and make sure that all interactions are sensible and that they make sense. So that's for the in-person setting. Then to the next slide was the virtual setting, with what we've been going through over the past 2 years with the pandemic. Obviously, we have seen a need for virtual setting way more than we ever had before. So we have had to readjust to the way we do training to accommodate the virtual setting. So in addition to the recommended guidelines from the slide before, you also want virtual training session that follow those guidelines. So record each session and make sure they're done in a professional setting. You want parental awareness, so obtain consent for virtual session, plus inform parents of activities that will occur. And then you want a weekly debriefing, encourage regular check-ins with parents, coaches, and participants about the virtual training. At this point, I know COVID might be going away. We might be going back to a more full-time in-person training, but I think that virtual training might still be a thing, and we are all tired of screen. We're all tired of having to do that interaction through a screen. So making sure that you're checking with your athletes, you're checking with everyone to make sure that everyone feels comfortable with everything is really important. So that is for the rule of 2. Then the second pillar of the responsible coaching movement is screening. So you need to determine the level of risk of an applicant and document how you will undertake the screen to screen the candidates. There is no rules about that. It's really depending on how you feel your organization needs to approach that challenge. Background screening ensures that applicants to your sport organization, such as coaches, team leader, employees, volunteers in contact with minors, but also in contacts with vulnerable individuals, meet the important requirements to participate in sport activities. So those requirements, you are the one setting them. You can take, there is many examples of different organizations having very extended screening policies. But it's really your decision to see how you want to approach the screening portion of the responsible coaching movement. Usually screening will include comprehensive job posting, visible policies and processes, criminal record check, and reference check, for example. All are equally important, and it says your decision on how to implement this and how to make sure that you're doing everything you can to have a safe environment. Then to ethical training. So the goal of ethical training is to empower your members and parents to recognize and prevent bullying, abuse, harassment, and discrimination. So what we call BAD. A smart sport environment ensure that members are trained and have the confidence and skill needed to effectively manage challenging situations. Those learnings will always evolve as we evolve within that field, but the awareness of those important topics throughout everyone's career is really important. I've listed a few examples of really good courses that you can have as a requirement within your organization. So one of them is Respect in Sports. It's a very complete course, about 3 hours, very extensive, that goes through everything that you might need to go through and that you might experience within your organization. So I highly recommend to be taking it. You also have the Coaching Association of Canada Safe Sport Training. If you're a coach, you have the NCCP Making Ethical Decisions, but also your NSO might have ethical training of their own that they have created. I will take an example with Equestrian Canada. They have their own safe sports ethical training called Fostering Healthy Environment that they have created that is geared towards the equestrian world. So if you're a PSO or a club and you're in contact with your NSO, you might ask them what kind of resource they have for you to be able to educate your members throughout the process. So we are done with the specifics of the Safe Sports initiative. So now let's talk about how to implement safe sport policies. So I just mentioned it earlier, each organization must ultimately develop the policy and process they wish to follow to meet the needs of their community. All of us have different reality, our sport are different. Yes, we have general guidelines that we can follow, but the reality of what you're going through as an organization requires that you sit down and you really take a minute to really understand your own environment and how do you best answer your safe sport needs. So first, the universal framework. So I wanted to talk about the challenges that I think we all have experienced as organization and as sports administrators or coaches within that environment. So the first challenge is an absence of generally accepted definition of safe sports or of a framework for understanding on advancing safe sports. Safe sport is really recent, 5-6 years ago. When I started in Canada, we didn't really talk about it. It's really coming up to speed and really becoming an important concept that we have to take care of recently. But we don't really have a general definition of it. Everyone has a different understanding of it. So really working on understanding the framework to advance this safe sport is going to be a challenge. Of course, Sport Canada is working on that. You know, we have the UCCMS being updated, like moving, evolving as we evolve within within safe sports. And the new mechanism for for complaint coming into place. But at the end of the day, it's still a very, very sometimes difficult topic to understand, and not everyone has the resource to spend that much time on understanding and creating that framework. So that'll be one of the first challenges. The second challenge is the community buy-in. Yeah, that's going to be the big one. I'll give you an example. I was doing a seminar on concussion with Karate Canada. And we had, athletes, we had volunteers, we had official, we had staff member. And so we go through the presentation and we get to the Q&A portion of it. And that one very high ranked official, and I don't know if you know, in karate, officials are the one assessing if the athlete potentially has a concussion. So they might be taken out the mat so they can, get better. But so first question he asked, what's the point of this? Our children have been getting concussion for the past 50 years. I don't know why it's becoming now a topic. So it's a question you might get often. It's quite frustrating to be asking those kind of questions, because the first question I wanted to ask is, are they doing that well? Like, you have people, their life are impacted by having a concussion, having long effect of a concussion, but we have victims of abuse, we have victim of harassment, we have a victim of assault within our organization, because we might not have taken the step to protect our members. So I think what you always need to bring it back to is really, are we doing that well? And do you really think there isn't anything better we can do so everyone is safe and included? So that community buy-in huge challenge for sure. Then you have variation in safe sport targeted populations. And what I mean by like, you might have your target population might be high performance athletes. If you're NSO, you have recreational sport, you have high performance athletes, you have coaches, you have officials, you have staff. It's just, you have, you know, potentially your integrated service team, you have support team, sorry. You have such a wide array of different members of your organization that needs to be taken into consideration within that safe sport umbrella. So that's for sure a challenge, and that's something that you need to keep in mind. You know, how levels of screening is something, or like level of education that they might require. So that will be something, yeah, to keep in mind for sure. And then the variations in safety focus, from protection from physical harm to protection of rights. I'll take an example. I work at the Oval for a long time. A coach at the Oval, they have the responsibility to make sure that the ice is safe from physical harm for their athletes when they're training. You know, no puck on the ice or anything like that. But we also have to make sure that our members, their rights are protected, you know, so no discrimination based on gender, sexual orientation, color, so it's such a wide array, going from the physical to like those human rights that are a bit more difficult to sometimes understand and like wrap your head around. So that is for the challenge. So for the next 3 slides, we have separated those level of implementation strategy to individual level, to organization, to a more national level. So at the individual level, what you really want to make sure you are focusing on is members' knowledge and awareness of safe sport policies, resources, and mechanism. So you really want to make sure that you use any tool that you have available, your website, your social media, email, newsletter, all of that, to really make your members aware that you are taking down this, you're going down the safe sport route, and you're taking that initiative, and that they have resources and mechanism. For example, the Canadian Sport Helpline is one. Everyone should know, everyone should have somewhere on their website that the Canadian Sport Helpline is here to support your members if they have anything that happens to them that would be considered abuse or maltreatment or anything like that. So even though the Canadian Sport Helpline might not have all the answers on your processes, they will have keys to support those people, those person if they need to talk. So that's one thing. Then at the beginning of the season, and I'm pretty sure we already all do it, but you should have mandatory acknowledgement of safe sport policies. I know they're long, they're boring to read, but they need to be, your members need to know they're available. Your members need to know they're there. If anything happens, to refer to them. Like, I'm not asking, you know, we're not asking them to know them by heart, but just to know maybe where to find them if anything happened. That way they have the ability to refer to them. So having an acknowledgement at the beginning of the season on a form, like it can be a form or something like that, being like, I understand that we have safe sport policies and I acknowledge them, would be important. Then, as we discussed, the mandatory safe sport education, I think this is really important, like having your members, your key members taking that safe sport education, like respecting sport, or the CAC safe sport is really important. It would be your role as an organization to understand who are those key actors and who needs to be taking those courses, but, you know, probably your athletes, your coaches, potentially your officials, if they're heavily involved in any process, and any staff that you have. And then delivery of educational programs, you know, having the ability and going down the path of seeing if you can support your members in getting educated on this subject. Being, you know, sharing the link to a safe sport webinar so your athletes know that they have rights, or like having a seminar on how do I make a complaint if I am an athlete, who is my independent third party, what's the complaint process, just to make sure they have the key if they ever need the key. And then at the organization level, So that will be the next slide for the implementation strategy. Implementation of harassment and protection policies that preserve the physical and psychological welfare of member. So really, as we mentioned, making sure that your policies are up to date. As you can see, it's always evolving. The UCCMS is evolving on a yearly basis. So you want to make sure that you keep yourself updated on those, that you keep an eye on that, and you make sure that your harassment and protection policies are up to date with the standard across the country. Then you have enhancing the interpersonal relation between members, creating that sense of community and that sense of belonging. I was watching a TED Talk earlier this week about, and his the whole concept behind his TED Talk, his name is, Matt Young. I can share the TED Talk with you, was if you see something, say something. If you see a coach that is acting in an inappropriate way, if you see someone, if you have the smallest doubt, you need to say something, because you might be protecting someone from something that would mark them forever. So really making sure that, you know, you have each other's best interests at heart, and really making sure that the best interest of the community is understood. Establishing independent monitoring and complaint mechanism. This one is a huge one. I know it might be difficult if you're a smaller club or anything, because there are costs associated with that for sure. But let's go through a situation. You're a club, you have an athlete that comes to you with a complaint about, let's go heavy, sexual harassment. Who is the committee? Who is going to take care of that complaint? Let's say you decide you have a board, it goes to the board. Well, what about privacy of that person? Because those people on the boards, quite often, they're involved in different aspects within the organization. They're parents, they are, you know, someone's aunts, whatever, like they're involved within the sport already. They might have heard stuff. Like the approach is not neutral and unbiased the way having an independent third party is. So if you can consider having someone external with a neutral eye and completely unbiased opinion coming in to look at that situation, to assess the situation, and to make the best decision for the victim, for your organization, for the potential abuser. So you really need to try to distance your day-to-day operation as an organization versus your complaint versus your complaints. And then just improve the condition of the environment, you know, raise your standard of expectation, screening, transparency, just expect more from everyone. And finally, last slide, very quick, at the national level, I've said it several times, your PSO will have initiatives and guidelines. The NSO for sure will have initiatives and guidelines. Keep an eye on the UCCMS, keep yourself posted on that. And then Sport Canada guidelines, really keep yourself posted on that as well. And make sure that you understand the evolution of the whole safe sport environment. So that is it for the presentation portion. Katriona, should we go to questions?
Sure. Perfect. Thanks, Lori. Thank you for that. A lot of information. So I'm guessing some might be familiar to some people, and some of the information might be sort of overwhelming. That's okay. Before we get to some questions, I want to remind everybody that there is a workshop coming up on safe sport. And again, Lori's going to take you through how to sort of implement some of these policies and go through what makes sense. So we will have that information for Sport Calgary members. And again, membership of Sport Calgary is free. The workshop for Sport Calgary members will be free, $50 if you're not a member. If you want to join Sport Calgary, we can send you some information, and my colleague Sandra can walk you through that as well. So as we go through some of the questions that were sent in beforehand, and again, some might come up as well, let's just go through a few of these. So I'm going to start with, what are some helpful resources for educating athletes and coaches about consent in sport? Because, we can have all of this stuff, but again, do people understand it, read it? Do they know it's there? So I'm going to start with that question to you, Lori.
Yeah, that sounds good. And that whole consent piece is so crucial to everything that has to do with safe sport. It's so important. And I must say, in terms of resource, we don't have as much as we should have on the matter. You do have Respect in Sport. The course will be talking about it. But I sadly, I'm not able to send you to a website about like respect in sport. If you about consent in sport, sorry, if you Google Athlete 365 consent, they do have a portion. I can get you the website. They do have a portion on consent in sport. How do we approach it? They have a video about it, but it's, as much as we want to, it's not something that's talked as much, because there is that belief that, the coach makes the requirement and then the athlete just go through the motion because it's their role. So that consent piece is still something that we have to talk about it more. But I would also recommend just have those open conversations with your athlete. Just have, be open to talk about this. Just really be open to be in that uncomfortable state of that conversation, because that's where you grow and that's where your organization will grow, when you ask those uncomfortable questions.
I think that's really important. I was just at a mayor's breakfast this morning for International Women's Day, and that was a lot of the conversation. It's about, we need to be uncomfortable in order to make progress. And so, you talked about, we all have a responsibility. We all have a responsibility. And so regardless of what your role is within your sport organization, whether you're a parent, a participant, coach, whatever, we have a responsibility. And so we need to take that seriously. Some stuff is not comfortable. We need to get uncomfortable. And this is the start of it.
We really do. Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned community buy-in. And so the next question is on that. It's types of getting the buy-in from the membership. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, and what a challenge, for sure. What a challenge. You will be facing people that will be really against it, that won't understand even the basic concept of it. As I mentioned, like my official was Karate Canada, just not even being able to wrap their head around it. So I think that it might be tiring, but you have to be consistent. You have to be willing to educate time and again, even though people don't want to be educated on it. You have to keep being consistent in your education. You have to keep being consistent in how you approach it and how you apply it to your organization. And then, maybe in 5 years or 10 years, we get to a point where if you're not buying into the safe sports movement, into the safe sport initiative, maybe you don't need to be a part of the organization. I think it's going to be like, you have to first go through education, through really being persistent on that. And then maybe in 10 years, we cross a different bridge where we're like, this is a non-negotiable requirement. And this is the way our society is going, the protection of athletes and making sure that they are at the center of everything we do.
Can I disagree with one thing that you said? 10 years down the road. I don't want to be there 10 years. Let's be there a lot sooner, and that's going to be the responsibility of all of us. And it's the fact that we don't want to face it, but there are situations that are unsafe or perceived unsafe.
Yeah.
And as a parent, regardless if a club that I'm going to join with my child is going to host competitions or not, I want to have the security that these proper situations are in place, policies, training. And so, I challenge everybody, ask the questions to your own club, ask the questions to clubs that you are a part of. Are these in place? And so if they're not, let's make them happen, because we're not going to wait 10 years. Let's not wait 10 years and have any situations that are unsafe. So on that, some people love policies, some do not. And we talked about at the workshop, you will help organizations go through these policies, figure out what's right for them, figure out what is actually in place. So this question really is for grassroots. Well, actually it's everybody, because I don't know if everybody knows their own policies, and that's, we'll all point a finger at each other and at ourselves. But how do you effectively communicate policies to grassroots club members? And I'm going to say actually more than just grassroots, to sort of all members, because policies can be so long. Is there, I don't know, is there a trick to that?
And you know what? I still haven't found the trick. I'll be honest. It's still something I'm looking for. Even for us, like I love policies. I write policies. It's my job. I still don't know all my policies, but I think it is our role as sport administrator to make sure that at least our members know where to find them if they don't know them by heart. Being a welcoming email at the beginning of your season, being like, hey, welcome to whatever you are, like club you are. This is the processes, this is our policy. You might refer to them at all time, if you need to. So really giving them, I find that sometimes on sports organization website, it's really hard to find the policies. So even having your Safe Sport tab at top of your website with your policies, your complaints process, all of that, really explaining it is important. And then, I don't know, does anyone else want to maybe participate on that conversation? Have you found any ways to get those policies informing your so it's a challenging one for sure. I don't have a clear answer at this time.
And I think it's difficult. I think sometimes you end up learning the policies in situations where you all of a sudden need it. And, I just challenge everybody, look at the organization you're involved in. Are they easy to find? Because I think that is one of the biggest problems.
Yeah.
They're not always easy to find. So make it user friendly, because when you do need them, you don't want somebody to be searching and to be looking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. And you and I had a conversation about this, I think yesterday when we were chatting on the phone. Question is about application of safe sport practices to sports facilities. Does that exist?
That is a really good question. Should I let you go first?
Well, no, I mean, I don't know. Do you know, I guess some would exist within the operation of a facility. But not necessarily would it go to these user group. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it is. And I think that's the interest. And I've had that conversation with Karate Alberta. Actually, I had a meeting with them that weekend. And, you have so many actors. You have the facility, then you have the potential club or organization renting the facility. And then you might have the club might be associated to the PTSO, PSO, or NSO. So many layers. I haven't seen many facilities with requirements at all, actually. It's a difficult one. I think there should have, when I think of the Oval, I think there would be value of them having those policies available somewhere so you can refer to them. Same with the swimming pool, having all those expectations of, and I think you talked about High River. Was that the right?
Swift Current. So Swift Current, and just so everybody knows, Swift Current is actually considered, I think it was called a safe community. So no organization, I believe, can rent space in the town without having training, respect training, and it being a safe environment. So I think that's great. And, to me, my dream would be that every facility looks at every user group, anybody who wants to rent, and make sure that coaches and parents are trained, are screened, etc. So, here's a sport law can help with some of the non-profit legal questions. And yes, I agree, Wayne, that when a facility signs a lease, they should make it mandatory that the club has safe sport policies and training as a requirement. So I think that's the direction we want to go. We want to make sure that sport understands that it's not against them. This is for them. This is for safety for everybody. And so this is part of the conversation we've had. And I continue to hope that in this community, we will have that. And so encourage everybody, this is the first step to making sure that sport organizations are protected and that everybody involved is protected. So we probably have time for just a couple more. What is the availability of an online module so it can be used as a course requirement?
And so I think that's what I've spoken throughout the whole seminar, you know, like respect in sport is such a great one. And I really recommend having a look at it. CAC Safe Sport is much shorter. So depending on like what kind of time you want to, you know, put into that. But I think the Respect in Sport one is a really valuable one. And I think, for example, with Karate Canada, everyone is required to take the Respect in Sport course to even be allowed to be at a competition. Yeah.
And I think that's, you know, it's a great point. We are very proud to partner with the Respect Group. And if there's anybody on here who's not familiar, there's the Respect in Sport for coaching, for parents. And we require all staff at Sport Calgary and board members to be trained in respect in the workplace. So really, really great courses. Some of these are not long at all. So under an hour and really wonderful and, you know, done great work. So a lot of online modules and yeah, thanks, Lori. So how best to align safe sport policies throughout organizations? Ooh, that's an interesting one.
That's a big one. That's a really big one. And sadly, it's going to be a never-ending project. You will never stop going through your policies one by one and making sure that whatever change you make to X policy, you have to also reflect it in Y policy. So it's a never-ending task. This is what I deal a lot with Equestrian Canada. Every time we do an adjustment to something, you have to do it to something else. Sorry, I lost track of the question. Can you just
Yeah, it's just about aligning policies within and throughout organizations.
And so yeah, having someone that is into it, like into policies, will really help making sure that they're aligned. But also, you know, as I said, this is not we're not reconstructing everything every time. You're not reinventing the wheel every time. Some organization, being your PSO, your NSO, have created those policies already applied to their level for sure, but you're more than welcome to go and look at what they did and just take it for yourself and just adjust it to your reality as an organization. So I really think we're not reinventing the wheel. We're just, you know, just recreating those policies. And I think it will really bring clarity to the whole sports system if from the highest level to, you know, your club level, your policies are aligned. It will make the whole system so much clearer and so much more efficient.
And I think it's important that even if some clubs here don't fall under a PSO or an NSO, you know, what Lori was talking about with the responsible coaching movement, all of these tools are available. You'd mentioned about coach.ca, the Coaching Association of Canada, and so the Safe Sport, the Universal Code, all of these things, regardless of what level of sport or what club, they're all relevant. And so I think that's very important.
And I just want to add to that, you don't have to be part of a club to go and have a look at what a PSO is doing. You know, you have some really great policies made by NSOs out there. We really have leaders in NSOs, in policies, and you are more than welcome to go and look at them and inspire yourself to create your own. Like we are all aiming for the same. It's a safe environment for all. So this is, you know, more, Yes.
And then my colleague Sandra just said, need assistance in accessing resources. Yeah, we can send you some more stuff as well. So the contact info is there. Question here, which is interesting. Are there similarities and differences working with youth? So whether we're talking 14 to 18, and it says young adults, but I guess let's look at the whole spectrum of sport.
And that's where your screening will come into consideration. When you go through the screening process, you have to look at who is that person working with. Is it a purely administrative role, potentially working with a few people around them, or is it a role with minors? Is it a role with vulnerable individuals? So that's the first thing. You have to identify who is working with who when you do your screening. But also the rule of two does apply more specifically for minors and vulnerable individuals. Yes, it's best practice across the board, but it is a requirement when it comes to children and vulnerable members. And then, we can go into detail, but each federation has their own rule. But for example, when you go into that young adult, the dating world, a coach shouldn't be dating their own athlete if they are under 25. And then you have all those rules really depending on each federation. There are a lot of layers to that question. And yeah, it's difficult because even sometimes I see training groups where you have minors and then you have over 18 athletes training all together. So how do you find the balance where everyone, we're sure everyone is safe in being respected? So it is an important topic, and there is no clear answer. It's really depending on what each organization has as policies about that.
And I think there are a few sort of hard and fast rules. There's somebody who's in a power position or any sort of influential position. There are some definite rules within that. But again, definitely becomes complicated when you're talking sort of that adult to non-adult when you're traveling, which leads us to, it's probably time for the final question. Traveling with minors, as a sport organization, that can, I think, get complicated.
It is really complicated. And I think I mentioned it earlier in the presentation. If you have the time and patience to sit down and come up with a transportation and travel policy, that really will help you, because basically you have your guidelines laid out and everyone knows how to behave because you have that policy in place. Sorry, I'm just looking for, you can have your competition and events policy where you have your expectation in terms of, alcohol and all of that, but also your expectations in terms of how to travel. Basic, don't have an athlete rooming with a coach. That's like one-on-one kind of situation. Make sure that you have both genders represented in your admin staff, in your staff, like support staff when you go in competition. Make sure that any interaction you have with your athletes are always done in an open, and justifiable environment. Shouldn't really have a one-on-one conversation with an athlete in a bedroom or anything like that. It's just making sure that you are doing everything you can so everyone is comfortable. Level of comfort varies from one person to another, but you always have to just consider that the level of comfort is really, really low. So that way you always behave the best you can.
And I think that's the biggest thing through all of this is let's think about these situations that could arise, right? Let's protect everybody so that nothing does happen where anybody is put into an unsafe situation. So just aware of the time, and a lot of people are finishing up their lunch hour. Thank you so much, Lori. Thank you for this webinar. As I mentioned, there is going to be a follow-up workshop. So that is going to be March 18th at Sport Calgary, which is it's going to be located we are located at Father David Bauer. It's going to be in person and in the WHL boardroom. It's going to be from 9 till 12. And again, for members of Sport Calgary, it's free, $50 for non-members. But please let us know if you are interested in joining Sport Calgary. We are going to have more of these workshops. So Lori will be taking you through how to implement and how to create some of these policies. And then we're going to be, just to let you know, April 1st, it will be April Fool's Day, but this is not a joke. We are really going to have our next webinar. It's going to be on grant writing. So again, very important for all our sport organizations. That will be followed up again by a workshop. So stay tuned. We'll have more information on our website and social media. But again, thank you, Lori. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. If you have questions, all the links are in the chat. We can send you this. It will be available, and all of the supporting documents and the video will be available. We're available to chat when you need, so just drop us a note. And thanks, everybody. Continue to stay safe, and again, happy International Women's Day. Have a great day.
Thank you.